There are two thoughts I had while watching the recording of the interview. One is that when several people awaken from the pain that they have been repressing their whole lives, they tend to go into the other polarity. One is this thing that we spoke about is, the place of everything is positive and they are in denial of the pain and the reality as it is, and they want to stay in their bubble of illusion. And this actually causes a very skewed, distorted perception of spirituality, which makes people who are on the other pole reject it even more. Because it's like, oh, I don't want to be like this person who is either preaching that everything is fine, or like an other type of person who awakens to the pain and just starts screaming about the pain and calls everything a doomsday scenario. So it's to realize that there is a middle place here, and we can find that middle place and we can find our power. So the other point that I want to add to this is that when we have very strong opinions about the existing system, we can also be projecting towards the people who need help to transform. And because they are feeling threatened, they go more into their dominating power, which is, we can say, one type of power which has not really created the results that anyone in the world wants. Even the people who are in power and who are controlling everything are not actually enjoying their lives. They are in constant anxiety and constant fear of losing their power, of being attacked. And it's basically a fear-based power. It's a fear-based consciousness that is using force to control everything. And I don't even call that real power. Real power is something that I feel my authority, I feel my power, and I can help others feel their authority and power. And that is where the harmony is. And it's very important, in my opinion, for people watching this to realize that you are not judged for what you have done by anyone more than yourself. If you can move past what you have done and you are ready to forge a new path forward, the world and their perception of you will change. But it has to be done for real. It's not just an act, because this is another thing which a lot of people pretend to get to see the light, and they pretend that everything is fine and positive, or they're again, breaking down and everything is shit and I'm such an evil and terrible person. All of that is based in stories. Everything is based in stories. So when we can just directly adopt a healthy story about ourselves, this is what I call superconscious healing and coaching, is that we can avoid a lot of shit, a lot of unnecessary processes which we think need to go on for decades to heal are not actually required. What is required is that you can directly adopt a healthy narrative for yourself and you practice that narrative. So it's not like you shift overnight, but as you're feeling the pain, you come into this new narrative. So it's not a denial and rejection of pain. You're not bypassing the pain, but you are transmuting the pain into this new narrative, into this new story, which is a healthy story about yourself, because you want to treat yourself with love, because you want to treat yourself well. And when you do that, automatically you bring that energy, that consciousness into the outer world. And like I said in the recording earlier, you can't do something in the world that is out of harmony, because you have found finally that harmony within yourself, and you have a total acceptance of everything that is going on, and you are not in some kind of projection where you are pointing fingers or shouting and being hysteric or anything. It's a very calm authority. It's a deep embrace. So you have power, you have beauty, you have love, you have pain, you have everything. So there is a way to embrace everything, and it's just realizing that this is entirely possible. We are talking about that. I said that healing has to first come from having harmony within yourself.
Yeah.
Without that, you can't heal what is outside,
Mm-hmm.
because you'll be working from disharmony, and wherever you work from is what you create on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
This is my opinion. You said, if you want to just repeat that.
Yeah. So what I said is that a lot of the things that happen from an unhealed space have helped as well point to injustice, unveil injustice, and also made progress, it helped us make progress. And so that's why I'm not sure, because also, when do you decide when you're healed? When is the right moment? When can you say, okay, I'm now healed, and everything that I do comes from a place of, yeah, being,
Harmony.
harmony and love.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mm.
And you also said that this is very idealized, that like,
Yeah,
yes,
because it's
everything will be peace and love. And
Yeah, exactly. I think we need those tensions, and like harmony
Mhm.
is something that we're often striving to achieve. And I don't think harmony is, I think it's a state that can
Mhm.
happen, but it's not a general continued state. It can never be just
Mhm.
harmonious all the time. And
Mhm.
and so many times as well, when activism is being criticized because it's just bringing discontent, it's bringing friction and conflict, but those conflicts are necessary to make us move forward as humanity. They've
Mhm.
always been, if it wasn't for conflicts, there would still
Mhm.
be slavery, there would still be, women would still not have the right to vote, or the right to work, or the right to have a bank account, so all of these things are the result of conflict.
Mhm.
And also within ourselves, what make us heal is also conflict. When you're not
Mhm.
feeling, when you have internal conflicts, when you're not at peace with yourself, this is what makes you move forward. So it's like
Mhm.
a state of constant movement.
Mhm.
And that's why, like, um I wouldn't say healing as an end in itself, that we all first need to heal before we change the world, because the world will never change. I don't think we
Mhm.
can all heal linearly together and all
Mhm.
agree to heal, because there's so many people who do not want to heal, very clearly do not want to.
Mhm.
Mm.
So I totally resonate with that, because for me, harmony, when I'm talking about internal harmony, is not about everything is peace and love and we are in la la land. It's not that state. It's where you find the balance of the tension between the opposing forces within you. So the light and the dark, the peace and war, good, evil, everything within you, you find the balance in that. That is harmony for me.
Okay.
And when you have that within yourself, that is when you understand that yes, the world is polarized and it has these sides. And what we have to find is the balance between these sides. It's not about just like, toppling the patriarchy to establish matriarchy, or like it's not one pole wins. It's how to have both polarities in balance. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
see harmony. How
Mm-hmm.
that's what, in my opinion, is the healed state. Is
Mm-hmm.
when we have the balance, not when everything is peaceful. When we find the balance of the friction, and yes, it's an eternal back and forth. But how out of harmony we are, we can reduce the gap, and how much back and forth is happening, we can reduce it, because today it's very volatile. And that's also, in my opinion, the outer world is a reflection of the collective consciousness of humanity. And that collective consciousness is a reflection of the individual consciousness. So that's where everyone is, or most people are, is very polarized within themselves. They have not found the balance. They have not found the balance even between spirituality and materialism. Like either it's all like, between activism and just living a happy life. And like all of these polarities are very stretched within each individual, where I am doing activism because I am unhappy, I am in pain, and I want to end pain outside. But I have not found that peace and happiness inside myself. So I'm not doing activism from a place of joy and positivity. I'm doing it from a place of pain. And in my opinion, that's why what you said is the general opinion about activism is that it brings up more conflict and more shit instead of actually creating resolution. Is that it's coming from the wrong place.
So I think pain can be transformative, and I think it's not the main opinion that activism brings conflict and more shit. I think this opinion, because it's voiced by people with a lot of power, with a lot of political and medial and financial power, it makes it look like it's the main opinion, but it's not. And those people are not in favor of activism because it's about changing their ways too. It's about taking the surplus of power that they have away from them. And so I understand that, being healed and trying to heal that pain, but also there's a thing that activism can be healing. It can have a healing effect on people. So when they see, okay, there's pain here, and I see that pain, and I want to deal with it, not just for me, but also for other people, and also not just like from my own life, but also for, from the perspective of a wider society, wider history, it can be healing too. And so that's why I'm a bit hesitant to say that, and I see when you say the polarities need to be, all the polarities within us need to be brought in balance. And that's a constant work, of also accepting the darkness in us and not just wanting to gravitate towards the light and all of this. But that's very much also what movements for liberation are trying to do. So I think it's an interpretation to believe that feminists want to establish a matriarchy, because this is not what 99% of feminists want. What they want is balance. What they want is equality and justice. It's not reverse oppression. And that's the same as well with, anti-racist movements or decolonial movements. They don't want to colonize the colonizers. They don't want to subjugate the colonizers. They want balance. They want equality and rights. And so that's why I think the balance that is not found is also sometimes outside of ourselves, right? So even if I have complete balance within myself, let's say I do reach that state of complete healing, and I'm completely healed and everything's balanced and I know how to navigate the polarities within me, it doesn't mean that it will automatically have an effect in the outside world, right? And so that's why it's not because of that place I am in that automatically, the conditions outside, the laws and the policies and, our monetary system and everything, the global political system will come to that state. And so from there can be more anger being generated and more pain that is not intrinsic to me, but to the situation outside of me. And so so that's why it's difficult, because we come to that point where people have reached that level of healing. The temptation is really strong to divest from any attempt to change the outside world, because then you get more of that in you, that you have managed to establish a boundary with, from. And so that's why a lot of the spiritual community is not really interested in healing the outside world, because once you have reached that for yourself, then you come into that bubble of your individuality, like this is your own field, your own history, your own polarities. And I think it's an illusion to believe that us as individuals are completely separate from the rest. And so that's why I feel like it's not about waiting for the perfect moment to be healed, because I mean, from my own perspective, I don't think it happens, because for me, healing is collective, so even the moment where I am personally healed will not be a moment of pure healing from my own perspective.
I Again, it resonates a lot for me because where I differ from your opinion is just that when you are in that place of balance, you don't need to take on what's happening with the world, but you're also not in denial and ignorance of it, and you don't need to separate from it. And the way you deal with it is very different from when you are in pain, your individual pain. So you can see the collective pain, and because you have already alchemized or transmuted your individual pain, you know how to do that at a higher level too now. And that's why the way you will approach it will come from a very different place. And yes, you're doing it for the collective. You're feeling the compassion for the pain that is being felt by the collective. And that's exactly the difference, is where you come from changes how you approach everything. And as much as possible, you have compassion for both sides. You see the full picture. You're not just fighting for one side. And like you said, it's not about taking over the other side, but you also understand where the other side is coming from. And because there is that understanding of both sides, it's easier to reach harmony. It's easier to be the voice that will create harmony rather
Mm-hmm.
than the voice which creates more disharmony or more separation between the two sides. Because the way I see it, what keeps happening in the world is that every attempt of harmonization, even if on the surface it results in more rights, less slavery, and all of this, the separation that's happening in the world keeps growing. People become more and more polarized into their individual camps, smaller and smaller tribes. And yes, there are bigger collectives which are being liberated, but then there's discontent that is being propagated. So this is where I feel like, the coming from a place of harmony helps both sides to harmonize, because you can see the pain that's on both sides. If one side is in pain, it's, in my opinion, it's clear that the other side is also in pain. They are establishing that dynamic because they are also in pain. So bringing that balance becomes a process where you're working with both sides, not with only one side. That's how I see it. And that obviously, in my opinion, begins within you, because you start seeing any imbalance that's happening within you is because two sides are in pain, not one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is something that is already being done. For example, a lot of if you look at feminist activism, there's a lot that is directed towards men and how men suffer under the patriarchy. Like in all my
Mhm,
books, I've always written about that.
mhm.
So I'm very aware of this. It's not about, a single issue or a single dimension, uh, um, or having a single perspective on things. Not at all. Um, yeah, so this is true. Um,
So it's
and I,
basically like we are working in the interrelation. We are not working in the polarities. We are working in the connection between two sides and harmonizing that.
yeah, it's about harmonizing, but it's, also I think because there's a disharmony at some points, um, it's important as well to, like bring, let's say there has been such an imbalance. So in order to correct that imbalance, maybe you need to put more weight on one side, because if from that imbalance you're like, okay, we're just gonna go, and tackle two sides exactly the same, then the imbalance is not going to be corrected. In order to correct the imbalance, then maybe at some point you need to put more weight on one, and you need to emphasize the perspective of one perspective, because this perspective has been cast as an important, it has been invisibilized, etc. So that's what's taking place as well, and that's why it's necessary. Um, and that's what a lot of people have problems with. I think it's also not about undermining the effects that it has when you do this work. Of course, there's going to be backlash. Of course, there's going to be resistance, because it's about changing century-long systems where people have found a certain comfort in them, or like a certain normality. And so anything that is geared towards changing this perceived normality is definitely going to cause friction. And so if we're trying to avoid the friction, change cannot happen. And so that's also my view on this, because I think we need to be able to contain that friction, to support it, to be able to live with it and to not get it off the way with all means, because in the long run, this is how we can get harmony.
Can you explain that a bit more? Like, so you're basically talking, if I understand what you're saying, is that when we allow the friction to come to the surfaces, that is how it harmonizes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that totally. Like, we have to surface the tension
Mm.
to bring it into balance. And
Yeah.
like that is the continuous process, is to keep surfacing the tension.
And this is exactly what's happening in the world right now.
Hmm.
Like we're at the tipping point of this, and it's going to intensify, I feel,
Hmm.
more and more. But the friction and the tensions and, like people retrenching to their little battlefields is
Hmm.
exactly what's going on. So I'm absolutely certain. I have nothing else but my trust and just maybe like a gut feeling that at the other side of it, no matter how long it lasts, we're coming to harmony. And
Hmm.
that it's going to be the end of these systems of oppression. It's going to be the end of the injustice the way we know it.
Hmm.
But until then, it's going to be mostly friction, mostly conflicts, mostly violence, because
Hmm.
this is what's needed in order to come there. Harmony has never emerged out of, just yeah, it needs some disruption at some point, I feel.
It needs this harmony in a sense.
Yeah. Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
what does the new world look like on the other side? When it is harmonized, what does it look like in your view?
Well, I think that the new world definitely looks like nothing like the world today. I think
Hmm.
we need to be able to envision something that has absolutely nothing to do with the world we know.
Hmm.
And I think it's going to be um, a place where, the physical world, the material realm plays much a lesser role than today, which is difficult to imagine because everything is material. Everything is material. The materiality of our lives is so brutal that, if you don't have little, or at least what we define as money, you can literally die, right? So yeah, the material world will erode in a certain way, and yet it will enable us to be more anchored, and consciousness will be our main vehicle. Like consciousness is going to be what drives our actions, what drives our being. And it's very abstract when I describe it this way. And also, me being as well on this path, and I don't even know, like, okay, what is my consciousness, and how do I develop it, and how do I, um, so I'm also speaking from a place of not knowing. Um, but yeah, I think we will go through a paradigmatic shift from the ego to the eco, like from the ego paradigm where, everything is hierarchized, where, the value of people is attached to what they do, to who they are, to what they look like, to how much possessions they have, etc., to a place where every single being and particle of the universe has its own place in its own right and doesn't need to be or do anything to be existing and to be worthy of existing. There's not going to be any justification for um, the existence of human beings, but also animals, plants, minerals. And I don't know how this shift is going to go, but probably with it's not that people are going to agree collectively, okay, we agree that money doesn't play an important role. Can we agree on this?
Hmm.
Because it's never going to happen, but there will be
Hmm.
shifts that make money redundant. I
Hmm.
think that money is not going to be part of this world at some point. There will be another way of living, because it's really a way of living. Money is a way of living. It's something that defines absolutely every single aspect of our lives.
Hmm.
And so it will be seen as a catastrophe, maybe like the absolute complete collapse of financial markets, the
Hmm.
collapse of monetary systems, and then at first it will be chaos, because how do we live without this? Like, how do we live without money? How do we even find our way back to what life can be without this system? And and then slowly, humanity has so much resilience, and we have lived most of the time on earth without money. But I'm giving just one example. Money is one aspect of it, but there will be all other things that will disappear: borders, and nation states, and institutions like wage labor. Wage labor is intimately tied to money, but this also will not be something that is in the new world. And this is very subjective, what I'm describing. This is
Mhm.
the utopia that I'm imagining, also
Mhm.
not knowing what it's going to look like, but I know what needs to disappear in order to be in a just world. And what needs to disappear is money as we know it.
Mhm.
And not just as a means of exchange, because money is so much more than that. Money is not just a means of exchange. Um, and the same with nation states and borders, and like police and militarization, police and
Mhm.
armies, and um, prisons. All of these
Mhm.
also need to disappear.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The way I see it, that there's going to be a lot more biomimicry in the world, in the sense that once we start understanding ourselves, our bodies, how nature is functioning, this is what will start getting replicated on the outside.
Hmm.
In my way of looking at it, it is our lack of understanding ourselves and the world or nature. It's our lack of understanding ourselves and nature that creates an imbalanced world where everything is just chaotic and based on scarcity. And the more we have an understanding of how our systems are functioning, where even where there is a hierarchy, it's not actually a hierarchy, it's more a center of operations. So if you look at our brain, our heart, and our gut system, like these are three brains we have within our body, but then they're connected to different organs. And there are different collections of energy centers where a lot of energy is concentrated. So there are like basically different levels of multipolar system. And right now, because of our emphasis on the intellectual or the rational mind, all the emphasis in the world is about feeding intellect. But the more we come into an understanding of the whole system of our body, that is what starts getting reflected in the world, where everything is respected. The whole system is respected. The whole world is respected. It's not just the intellectuals who are respected and fed, and the rest are basically ignored. So that's why I feel like, again, it comes back to once we come into harmony within us, that is what gets reflected on the outside. When the leaders of the world find that harmony within themselves, they automatically cannot create disharmony because it's it becomes like an impossibility. Like when you have that much connection to your system, to your own heart, to your own body, you cannot create something that will be out of harmony in the world. So I feel like this is the recalibration, and whether it has to go through a lot of friction and collapse, I feel like there are infinite ways that the recalibration can happen. And that is definitely, in my opinion, a reflection of the consciousness of the person, like how the recalibration happens, how you treat yourself. Like, are you a person who treats yourself with love and care? Like, I feel like in that already the recalibration that you will do for yourself will be very different from someone who has a lot of self-hatred, will go through a spiritual path which has a lot of persecution, which has a lot of pain and anger and hatred. So I feel like even the path, the journey of healing has a lot to do with where we are in our consciousness. And we can choose a path for ourselves, for and then for the world that we live in, which has a very different outcome. And
Hmm.
it's yeah, like I am not a fan of utopia because utopia has never existed. I don't believe in utopia. I believe in the balance where the light and the dark exist simultaneously. And how do we find that balance? That is my endeavor, is like through finding that within myself. Now it's what I'm bringing out into the world.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. When you describe the lack of knowledge of ourselves and like that it's a replication, it makes total sense. And I think we have, since the Enlightenment, there has been such a violent process through which any connection with nature has been killed and repressed and declared as inferior, that we have lost touch with it collectively as, humans. And not all of us, but yeah, this was part of also the colonial enterprise to just cut that tie with nature. And this is how humanity has lived for as many years and thousands of years before as well. Even long, long before, I would say until the agricultural revolution. This is the agricultural revolution that changed everything. Um, so also long before colonialism. I'm not putting all the blame on colonialism, but of course it was part of, where we are today is definitely as well linked to this, and the fact that we have lost touch with nature in such a way, and that we also, see nature as something separate from us is a result of the Enlightenment for sure. And yeah, and so that's why, yeah, it can take place in many ways. I think it's also about, how we say that in the personal healing process, it's also about letting go. It's about letting go, and it's about allowing that to happen. It's the same from a collective perspective, because we hang on to something we know because we don't want to let go. And also we want to have the responses, we want to have the answers, like a very clear definition or a very clear description of what the world is going to be like. And so until we have that, we're not willing to let go and to allow the change. And so I think this is also what needs to happen. And sometimes we're forced to let go. Like we need to come to a point of no return in order to actually let go. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, like I understand that perspective of letting go, and at the same time, I feel like, there is again the balance of directing and allowing something bigger to take place. Because if we just let go, there is chaos. Like it, it's the nature of the universe. Like if you don't put any intention, it's just chaotic energy. So I feel like again, it's that balance of within ourselves, the masculine and the feminine, where it's not just forcing a particular outcome through this
Mm.
certainty mindset, through I will do it this way, but it's also not just like let God take care of it and I have no responsibility. So I feel like it's again in the middle ground where I know that it is possible for there to be a harmonious way to that new reality. So let me put my effort into channeling that reality, that path into existence. Because if I don't put any effort, yes, it's very much possible that the scenario that you spoke about materializes. But we
Mm.
can have a totally different scenario once people at different levels of influence, impact, and consciousness start realizing that, okay, we have made mistakes, we have forgotten the connection with nature, and it is vital to bring it back. And it is finally self-preservation, right? Like the only reason nuclear war has not happened yet is self-preservation. It's because it's non mutually assured destruction. So I feel like as a collective, we have enough consciousness to know that a major recalibration is on the horizon. And if we put our effort and our consciousness into it, there are definitely more harmonious paths to that recalibration. So
Mm.
that's how I see it from where I am today, because I have definitely been in that mindset of the doomsday scenario where, yes, everything collapses because a lot of things are fucked. Yes, I get that. But, and there's lots of people who are like, oh, if it's too late and blah, blah, blah. I honestly don't believe that because I feel like that definitely is a reflection of the state of consciousness. I have been there, and that's why I can say that. That
Mm,
coming to where I am today, I know that there are so many possibilities and very quick changes can happen because I've seen that within myself. Like I come from, like, if I just talk about my history, I come from a place of depression and drug addiction. People say drug addiction is for a lifetime. People say depression, some types of depression have no healing, and that was the kind of depression I had. I am nowhere close to that today. I'm out of drug addiction and all of that. And for years, nothing was shifting. But when it actually shifted, it was very quick. So when I found the way, it was very quick. But this is exactly like before that, it was like, there's no time, it's going to take forever, it's lifetime, it's this, is that. So I feel like it's so important to understand that when you are in a different place yourself, when you're in a different state of consciousness, the possibilities that open up are unimaginable from that other place. So this is again where the shifts can take place within us, is realizing that it doesn't have to be this way. It's not inevitable that when I change something within myself, new paths start opening up. And let me look for the path that is most harmonic.
mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing is, how do we get there, right? So because now I think we agree on this, but
Working
how
with people, working with people at different levels. That's exactly my perspective now, is that when the right people, when key people get this, that energy radiates, because this is how energy is organized in the world today, is that it is got this top-down effect. Once the consciousness of people at higher levels is rewired, that radiates automatically. That's how I see it. It's
Mm,
also how our own systems function. If
mm,
the brain is toxic, if our mind is toxic, if it's not functioning properly, if we have a physical problem in our brain, the whole system suffers, right? So the moment I have the right energy flowing in my brain, everything changes in my whole system. So that's that's in my opinion the way we recalibrate is working with people who have impact and influence
mm,
to help them harmonize themselves and come into harmony with the world.
mhm. Yeah. So it's about finding those people and starting the work, which is not going to be intellectual work, right? It's not going to be on the cognitive level. I think it's important to mention because there are a lot of people who stay stuck there, and it's not about thinking about it. It's not about
It's not
devising
even
it.
about believing. It's not about believing and thinking. Like you
Mhm.
said, it's beyond the cognition. It's where the whole
Yeah.
system has to come into balance. And that is definitely missing in the whole spiritual space and the healing space. That there are some people who are now talking about, holistic and integral, but again, it goes into a lot of this. I would say it becomes too spiritual. It becomes disconnected from the reality that we are in.
Mhm.
And for me, holistic or integral is where it is connected to where we are today. You don't need to go too much into the spiritual. There's a lot of healing, like you said, that can take place right here in the everyday life, in the everyday world, but
Mhm.
through the whole system, not just the mind.
Yeah. And so how would that look like? What kind of work? And how would it be organized? How would it be structured or not? Or yeah.
How is a very good question. I think from my experience, it's definitely something that has to be tailored to an individual. It can't just be a prescription of everyone practices the same thing, because that's been tried and failed over and over again. Everyone who has come and given a prescription on this is how to live life, it's never really worked, because following the prescription, it starts at the mental level, and that's where everything is failed. So definitely the work needs to be personalized, but it can be done in groups of people, because when we start, and like you have already experienced this, that when you see another person going through their process, automatically you get the reflection. So in groups of different sizes, that's where I have found there to be most powerful transformation.
Mhm. Yeah. So really in our work, working all of us on harmonizing the polarities within us. So if we can describe healing as this, or at
Mhm,
least as part of this, or partly as this, and then see what happens. Like from there, see how these shifts and these transformations have a ripple effect on our environments.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, it can change. And so I think this is happening. There are many different pockets of these types of work being done.
mhm,
And so if I can say something about that, I think what I particularly appreciate with you and the work that you do is that it's not dogmatic at all. That it's really going straight to the point. It's like really no bullshit. It's not about, giving magical sentences or affirmations that you need to tell yourself and like, seeing the bright side of life, but really, yeah, dealing with us humans as wholes and not trying to change ourselves, but more trying to, um, yeah, really trying to incorporate pain as well within our existence in a way that it's not about pushing it away, or it's not about trying to depict a world that is not. And I think if we all do that, we would be able to, yeah, to change the global perception of the world, right? I mean, it sounds extremely ambitious and and very, but that's that it's, I think we all have this power in our own little universes to do that. So yeah.
And there's two things to add to that is that nothing has happened without ambition and
That's true.
aspiration. And secondly, it's exactly as you said, is that, when within a group, each person comes more and more into harmony, then they take their individual gifts and that ripple it out through whatever their gifts are. So if you are an activist, you take this new consciousness into your activism. If you're a coach, if you're a healer, if you're a teacher, if you're a politician, whatever you are, you take
Mm.
this new consciousness into whatever is going on. And that's, I think, also the beauty of it is that it's not meant, like this kind of work is not meant just for a certain group of people or type of people. It's really meant for anyone and everyone who wants to come into this harmonious state of consciousness within. And
Mm.
just to speak a bit more to that, we are saying that it's not about utopia and it's about incorporating pain into our lives as a reality, that pain is a reality, but so is joy and happiness and love. So it's how to make these two poles coexist, like how to make power and love coexist, how to make beauty and pain coexist, how to make all of these things coexist, that we don't have to just be like you said in the beginning that, oh, I'm healed now. I don't want any pain from the world. So I will just go and live in the middle of nowhere and disconnect from everything. I don't have to quit social media. I don't have to quit the world just to protect my little bubble. No. So the way I see real power, our real power, each individual has the power to actually face pain that is present in front of them, that's present within them. We can come into that level of power that we don't have to deny or reject anything, that we can be in total acceptance. And our power is to be able to alchemize and harmonize the pain. We don't
Mm.
need to run away from it. And that is, the more we do that, the bigger the levels at which we can alchemize pain. The deeper you come into alchemizing your own pain, the more levels of pain you can alchemize in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's, yeah, it's something, like we need to be connected with hope at all times anyways. This is our essence as well as humans. And so I think it's, it's not a matter of believing, but it's also a matter of being connected with that hope as well.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
it's not, we
it's
need to have the certainty that yes,
mhm,
this is the solution. There's not one solution. It can be
mhm.
concomitant with many other approaches as well.
Yeah, I so synchronistically, like just today morning, I had a whole burst of inspiration through which I ended up writing a tiny booklet, which is very related to all of this. It's like a 20-minute read. So I will share that with you and we can add it to this.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.